Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight to join us. I thought I would start off tonight by giving you a little background and tell you how we got to this point. There are a few of us in a text group that share photos. We share all kinds of things, all kinds of comments, anything to do with birds we share. And a conversation started a few months ago about purple martins. A few of us shared some, I think I had a video that a friend sent to me. Melanie had been to see them in Columbia, like, so we got on the subject of purple martins. Well, that subject went from, oh, wow, these are very interesting birds, to do we have purple martin housing on Seabrook? And when we realized that we didn't, then we started going down that road. Okay, what would it take to have purple martin housing on Seabrook? So fast forward a few days or a week or two, and our Jennifer Jerome said, I have got just the person to guide us and give us all the information we need for setting it up. So it went to the board, our board approved, we had a grant, went through the grant process, got that approved. The next thing you know, we have the maintenance department installing this large tower out at the equestrian center. And we are now purple martin landlords. So that's how we got from nothing to where we are today. So, and Jennifer Tyrrell has been very helpful in getting this started. She came out, met with us at the walk all over the equestrian center, helped us pick out just the right spot for it. Gave us some really good guidance. So I think you're going to enjoy hearing from her tonight. And I want to read her bio. I don't want to forget anything. So she's the Community Science and Research Program Manager at Audubon, South Carolina. In that role, she specializes in Modus Tower installation and operation, native plants, bird-friendly communities, bird banding and research, and occasionally hosts bird trivia and paints bird murals. I'd like to know more about these murals. Jen lives on James Island with her husband and two daughters, and probably one of the most fascinating facts about her, she and her husband own the oldest bar in Charleston, Jean's Hofbrau. So you could ask her about that too. So please help me welcome Jennifer Tyrrell.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for having me tonight. It's really exciting to see folks just take on conservation in their own hands and in their own communities like you guys have done here with the purple martins. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, cool. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and just jump right into it. Congrats, you are a purple martin landlord. And while you don't have any residents quite yet, the for rent sign is out there, and there are people flying by or birds flying by every day. So hopefully someone will take up residence pretty soon here. But just an overview of what I'm going to cover tonight. I'm going to be talking about purple martin ecology, history, site selection for new colonies, housing options, predator proofing, maintenance and monitoring, and then issues you may run into. So it sounds like you guys are trying to drum up some volunteers to help monitor the purple martin colony. And what's nice is once it's set up, there's really not a whole lot to do. The maintenance and the monitoring it's fun. It's not labor intensive. So it's not a hard sell to get people involved. Okay, so the purple martin is the largest member of the swallow family. So swallows like barn swallows and tree swallows. It's in the order Passeriformes, which is like a songbird. And it's the family Hirundinidae or something like that, but it's the swallow family. And then this picture, I believe, was from Catesby. He was one of the other naturalists that actually came before John James Audubon to the Low Country, and he also documented a lot of different birds, as well as other flora and fauna. But first, we're going to talk about identification. This is an after second year male, meaning he is a full adult. So he is at least 2 years old. He's in his third year of life, if that makes sense. I actually was on an hour-long call today about aging criteria. There's this whole different code that banders are using now, and I'm trying to learn it. So as I was practicing, this is a DCB, definitive non-molting basic plumage martin, which means nothing to most people, and it barely means anything to me. But anyways, this is an adult bird. So adult males have that beautiful purple sheen, almost blue in some lights. It's very iridescent, kind of depends on what light you're looking at them. You'll notice that it does have a very squared off tail. think that's a laser. So with the barn swallows you see around, it's a much deeper fork. So you've got like a little bit of a notch right here, but they do, once it fans out, it's pretty triangular. Unlike the barn swallow, and then more notch than the tree swallow. So the subadult or the second year males, so these are males that have hatched the year before, they've flown down to Brazil or wherever they were going and have come back. They don't quite have all the fancy feathers that the adults, you can see a little one here and a little one here coming in. So you can tell that they're probably a male, but they're not quite adult yet. They sometimes cause some trouble, like most young men do. And then here we have the adult or after second year female. So she's got kind of fuller, if you look at these feathers on her belly, you'll see that there's like a white rim to it. And the rest of it is kind of like a dark mottled color compared to a young female that has a much wider white rim on those feathers. All that to say, it's kind of tough to tell how old they are unless you spend a lot of time looking at them. Another thing to look at with a female, obviously they're not going to be as bright purple as the males, but they do have some. And then these feathers are called the undertail coverts. If you look at this bird's undertail coverts compared to this bird's, that's a really good way to tell the difference. So you've got a young female who came back for her first year. She's already migrated back and forth once. And then this one, she's she's got everything under control. She's done it more than once. So she's a survivor. Now, their general movements, we have them during the breeding season, and these are two kind of separate populations of purple martins. We have the West Coast and Western population, and then the Eastern one. We're going to be talking about the Eastern one because they are kind of unique and special in a way, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But they actually winter in Brazil. And has anyone seen the documentary Purple Haze? Yeah, I think you guys may have hosted that here. So Zach actually went down to the Amazon and got to see where the purple martins, where there's like huge roosts of them, millions and millions of them. And it turns out like all of their droppings like feed the entire ecosystem down there. They bring in a lot of phosphorus in a very nutrient poor river system and bring in nutrients to like support all the plant matter and insects and things like that. So it's really cool that they are kind of important on their wintering grounds for the habitats there. And then they do a lot for us up here. Now, when they start heading back up north, the first scouts, so the first couple birds start showing up. They don't all come off the bus together, but they'll kind of start spreading out and showing up a little bit at a time. But they even start coming back in January. So they don't spend a ton of time in the Amazon. But some of the first ones will start arriving to the Gulf Shore, Gulf Coast, and Florida, and start making their way up. And they get to us usually around like mid to late February. That's when people start seeing the first scouts and start reporting them. And then, obviously it takes them a little bit longer to get all the way up to Maine. The main reason is because they need the warm weather to be consistently warm enough to support the insects. They could cover that distance in much less time, but they have to wait for the insects to be abundant enough to actually make it worth going up there. So flying insects are their main diet. We have, these look like little termites, probably winged termites taken off. I've seen a lot of those lately, so make sure your termite bond is up to snuff. I've seen like 3 different colonies in different places, all just going everywhere. And then they eat a lot of moths and butterflies, the Lepidoptera genus. This next one has like a little wasp in its beak. So little flying insects, stinging insects. And can you guys tell me what age and gender this one is? It's an adult male. Very good. This was taken at Mary Pringle's Purple Martin colony on Isle of Palms. Mary Pringle, she's really big with the sea turtle team. She does a lot of bird work. And she runs a very tight ship with her martin colony. And I learned all of the martin stuff from her. So I owe her, but we spent a lot of time at her colony. Now, spoiler alert, they don't actually eat mosquitoes. So turns out that ugly rumor was started by a man who made purple martin houses, and he really wanted to sell a lot of them. And so he made up that they eat 2,000 mosquitoes a day. They don't. They eat a couple maybe, because I mean, if you think about it, it's like, would you eat a full sandwich or are you just gonna eat one piece of popcorn? you're going to eat that big moth, not a tiny, tiny mosquito, and spend all that energy eating a ton of mosquitoes instead of getting something bigger that's more energy efficient. So sorry, they don't eat a lot of mosquitoes. They actually eat insects that eat mosquitoes, but whatever, we're not going to go there. The town, I think this is in Indiana where he lived. It's like the Purple Martin capital of the country or something like that. And he had this big mural painted on the side of a building, and he actually changed his phone number to end in like 2000 because he was like pushing this little false stat. So kind of silly, but anyways, they usually eat flying insects like dragonflies is another one. And they go and forage usually higher than other swallows do. So 150, 160 feet to 500 feet in the air, which is pretty high up there. I wouldn't even think about insects being up there because we're not hanging out up there. But they are, and they do, and that's where they do a lot of their foraging. And one interesting fact I haven't actually put into here is where you have purple martin colonies, active ones, you have fewer fire ants because when the queen fire ants take their like maiden flight or whatever they call that, if there's purple martins around, they usually pick them off as they're going. And so fewer colonies are supported. So they might not eat mosquitoes or that many mosquitoes, but they do help control fire ants in a natural way. So that's really good. Cold weather can impact the early migrants. So those scouts that are showing up, especially the ones that showed up to Florida when we had that really cold snap and everyone was having freezing temperatures, that could actually kill purple martins because they have to eat flying insects. Insects will only fly if it's higher than 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So if it's that cold for that long and bugs are not active, they'll starve to death. So the cold weather or cold, wet spring can really have an impact on them. It can result in low foraging over water, and starvation can be an issue with the spring, cold snaps, and they will not forage in rain. So for a long time, the eastern population and the western population nested in natural cavities, like this snag here. Just like you think of a woodpecker, they make their own cavities, so they're a primary cavity nester. But purple martins were secondary cavity nesters, which means they would use cavities that were already in existence. Like bluebirds, they don't excavate a cavity, they find a house or an old woodpecker hole or something like that. And so the eastern population actually had a whole behavioral shift where they only nest out of human-made structures. They don't nest in natural structures at all anymore. And you saw how big that eastern population was compared to the western. All those guys, none of them nest in trees or in holes or anything like that. And that's because they're kind of like the domestic dog of the bird world. Long, long ago, when Native American tribes were abundant across our landscape, they were actually the first purple martin landlords. And it worked out like a symbiotic relationship. So they would put up gourds in their gardens, and the birds would eat, pest insects and help control moths that would cause caterpillars to eat their greens and things like that. And they would also send out alarm calls when there was pests nearby. So say a raccoon or a fox or something coming in to like raid their garden or get into their food stores, the purple martins would alert the humans that there was something around that they need to be taken care of. And in return, the martins got a gourd to nest in, and they also got protection because I'm sure the Native Americans would, make sure snakes weren't getting up the pole. They would make sure owls weren't sitting on there. They would watch after the birds. And so it really worked out well for both parties. So much so that they stopped nesting in natural cavities altogether. The birds figured out it was a good deal to hang out in someone's yard and have someone take care of you, and it's worked out pretty well for them. So that's why we all need to put up purple martin houses, because if we don't, we won't have these birds anymore. So the housing, there's a lot of different options, but this, tradition goes way, way back, hundreds of years, obviously, with the Native Americans. But also in early Americana, when Audubon was, traveling across America, he used purple martin houses like the first Yelp, in a way, like a Yelp review. He said, almost every country tavern has a martin box on the upper part of its signboard, and I have observed that the handsomer the box, the better does the inn generally prove to be. So the nicer purple martin house, the better digs. So I guess Jeans needs a purple martin house now. So if we're going by that standard. And way back when, 1892, here's a picture of an old purple martin colony. It's kind of neat to see how they managed it. They've got like a little ladder to get up there and look at it. But it's just part of the landscape. It was part of country and rural living for a long time. People get real fancy with it. Um, Woodworkers are probably impressed. I mean, I don't think birds need handrails, but they're there. It's it's very nice, very elaborate. And so it was, a point of pride, and something fun for a lot of folks to do. And still to this day, people make very large, kind of insane, purple martin houses. Now, I have questions about their functionality. We're going to talk about what makes a good house and what doesn't. Sometimes the really fancy things are not super functional. Parasites become a problem. You need to be able to clean them out. You need to be able to check on them. The hole needs to be the right size. There's a lot of specifics that go with it that I don't know if houses like these really do a good job. But when you're looking at placing a purple martin house or a gourd rack or whatever, there's kind of two ways to do it. A lot of people think you have to have water nearby. That's not the case. You don't need water. They like water nearby, but it's not like a deal breaker for purple martins. But if you have a dock, you want it the furthest away from a structure. It doesn't have to be your house necessarily, but a structure, because they just associate structures with people. The furthest away is about 120 feet. Minimum of 30 feet away from a house, but that's even like a gray area. So Mary Pringle, hers is like right in her front yard, probably about 20 feet from her porch. So, and it's actually right on like Ocean Boulevard. There's cars, there's a sidewalk going right underneath. So they can be very tolerant of people and all of our ongoings. They don't scare easily. They've kind of adapted to be with us. So you don't have to worry about that part of it. But if you have a yard, you want to make sure it's about 40 feet minimum away from trees and surrounding like tall structures and shrubbery and things like that. They like a nice big open area to be able to fly into their colony. So those are the main placement distances you want to consider, but you also want to consider like, how much are you putting up? How much is too much? Probably this. I have no idea. I mean, maybe this guy looks very proud of his purple martin house, but I'm curious how he cleans out those cavities. Like, how does this port and that port work together on these sides? Like, how is it big enough? I don't know. I have so many questions, but either way, don't bite off more than you can chew. You want to manage the colony in a way that's good for the birds and that is not going to stress you out and make you feel guilty, because he'll do that. Those birds are sweet and they make you feel bad. You need to think about easy access. I don't know how he climbs up here. A ladder, maybe? And no one wants to be on ladders, I'll tell you that much. And then a healthy colony does need management. So these are two examples of nice thoughts, nice attempts, but if you think about checking on your nest, monitoring your nest, this is probably not a good idea, because if you do that, oh no, there goes the babies just tumbling right out. And then this one here, I mean, look at this little support thing. I mean, one gust of wind, that thing could blow over. And then also, how are you going to get up there to change those gourds out? Those gourds are probably only usable for one season because you can't really clean them out. So they're almost like a temporary thing. So maybe they change them every season. I don't know. But manageable housing is a big deal. The minimum cavity components and compartment sizes, you need at least 7 inches wide, 7 inches tall, and 12 inches deep. And that's bigger than what a lot of people assume that they need. And there are a lot of houses on the market where those compartments are not that big and they're not big enough. At Silver Bluff, has anyone ever been to Silver Bluff? It's in Aiken, Augusta area. It's our other center. We have about, I think, 3,800 acres over there on the Savannah River. But before I started working here, someone had put up a purple martin house on one part of our property, and I kept looking at it. I'm like, I don't think I like that house. The birds have never nested in there. We really need to do something different about this house. So finally, we got some grant money. I was ordering the gourds. We were going to get it up, and we had plans to do this. And lo and behold, a pair moved in to that house, that old house, and we're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. Well, one day we were there with a group of birders looking at it, and the female was trapped in the doorway and had died because it was not big enough, and she was trying to turn around and got wedged and stuck and couldn't get out and died. So it's like, it was a good learning moment that you indeed need the right and appropriate house sizes and compartments to make sure that the birds are safe. So gourds work really well, but one thing you need to make sure, like the natural gourds, is a really cool, but if you're going to monitor your colony or do any banding or anything like that, you want an access door. So you can see this, like, it looks like a jar lid, like on a big thing of like cheese balls that you get from the store. It's kind of similar style jar lid right there. That is really easy access. You can open it up, see clearly, you can reach your hand in. It's very accessible. And you can get those houses, but just make sure the house compartments are the right size and you can access them and clean them easily and sanitize them. One thing I like to recommend, it's more expensive, but if you're going to spend this much on a birdhouse already, make it easier for yourself. The winch system for raising and lowering the gourd rack is a game changer. If you're unsure about your stability or if those things get rusty, we're on the coast, everything rusts. If you're just trying to pull a pulley cord up and down, it's not as good. I like a winch and I highly recommend that. And then of course, every good colony needs management. And the key features that you want to consider is a way to raise and lower the gourds. Like I mentioned, the winch system is a really good option. Is this a video? Yes, it is. All right, let me see. See if it plays. So this is during one of our nest check and banding situations. This is on Isle of Palms, the Ocean Boulevard. And you can see the adults are all flying around. They're so used to this, they're not even upset. They wait for Mary or her husband to like crank it back up. But you can see he's using the winch. It goes up nice and slow. The birds are not bothered by it. One thing that we do recommend is if you are checking your nests, if the chicks are close to fledging age, you have to block up the holes as you raise it up and then wait a few minutes. So like a paper cup on a string works really well, or a washcloth on a string, just to make sure they don't come hopping out before they're ready. But we don't have martins yet, so we'll get to that issue when we get to it. And you also want a square or triangular pole, because if you have a round one and the wind shifts it at all, those birds are then going to get into a fight because they have confused which gourd is theirs because it's shifted in space. They're so like 3D dimensionally keyed into their nest site that if it shifts at all, then they're just going to keep fighting and the chicks aren't going to get taken care of. You might have like just a bad situation. So if you have a square or triangular pole, that keeps them from rotating enough out of the way that the birds are going to fight over the different cavities. And then a predator guard is always important. I'm going to talk about predator guards in a minute, but you want a removable one so that you can take it off to then raise and lower your pole in your gourd rack. So stovepipe baffles are the typical ones we see on bluebird houses and some of our feeder poles, something similar to this. Some companies make some great ones that are just like cut in half. They have two little clips on them, so you just pop them on and pop them off like a hot dog bun kind of. And you want to make sure there are no gaps up here because these little guys will help themselves to a little egg breakfast if they can get up in there and get between the pole. And even though it's a smooth, metal pole, snakes can still find their way up. There is, or we do recommend if you do have an active colony and you're, around where snakes are, which here I imagine you have rat snakes and racers and things like that. They're just a part of the, environment. It's fine. But if you get bird netting, like the stuff you put over fruit trees, it's like the plastic kind, you ball it up and just shove it underneath the stovepipe there. The snakes will get tangled in it. And so you can stop the snake from climbing up, but it's good etiquette to then remove the snake. So if, make sure you have a friend who's okay with that. If you're not okay with it, I've done it for a number of people. Snakes don't bother me, but they do get tangled up in it. And it's, you just have to get them out of there, cut them out, and then take them somewhere else to be someone else's problem. But they will leave your martins alone. So the other type of predator baffle that a lot of people don't really consider are avian predators. Cooper's hawks, the daytime accipiters, the forest hawks are really good at catching birds. That's their main diet. So it can be pretty stressful if a Cooper's hawk decides to post out at your martin colony. They can take adults and they're pretty good at it. But at night, a lot of people don't realize that even if they don't hear or see owls often, they will come up and try and get birds out of the gourds, and they'll just kind of hang on the side, reach in with their talons, and pull out either an incubating adult or the chicks. But these funny little things here, they look like little bug antennas that will keep owls from being able to perch on the gourd. So that helps to mitigate any owl predation at night. So I highly recommend these owl guards. And then another thing you could do, I think I mentioned this at some point. Well, I'm going to mention it now. There is, let's see, one of these is usually, there's a fake decoy one. And I think you guys have a decoy on yours. And decoy is great because it attracts young birds to a new colony. They think, oh, someone's already there, I'm moving in. But the other thing that it does is that it makes it look like a very slow martin. And so if a Cooper's hawk comes up, everyone else flies away and he sees the idiot still sitting there. So he goes in and hits the decoy and is like, oh, wait a second. So it can help save your bird's life. All right, so for new colonies, you want to have them up by June 1st. So you guys are right ahead of the game. You have it up early enough. There's still young birds. Usually it's a young second-year couple that will move into a new gourd rack or colony. And so they don't usually start first thing in February and March like the established colonies do. But the existing colonies, you want to have it up by the third week in February. That's when we really start to see the scouts coming in and the ones who are going to return for that year, or new birds that are going to come in and move into open gourds and things like that. So timing is important. March is great, but by June 1st, hopefully you'll still get some birds. And that's Mary Pringle and her colony. It's the best. I think that one's her decoy right there. But all right, next slide. I think we have had an issue with something similar, but you do get squatters in your condos, like the European house sparrow, this guy, and then the European starling. We have Shakespearean enthusiasts to thank for these two. If you don't know the story of the starling and the house sparrow, they were mentioned in Shakespeare's plays, and some Shakespearean geeks back in the 1900s, or I think 1900, introduced these birds to America in Central Park in New York to have them here because they thought that was a good idea. And now they're everywhere and they're a problem. But they will move into purple martin colonies. They will defend them and scare away all the martins. So if you see, these guys are not federally protected. I don't condone killing birds, but I'm going to look the other way. If someone has to deal with a house sparrow in a martin colony, it is not illegal to deal with them, is what I'm saying. So, however, these guys, there are native cavity nesters. We have bluebirds, adorable, we love them, and little chickadees, couldn't get any cuter. They will sometimes move into those gourds. You cannot mess with them. So if they move in and they lay eggs, you just have to let them do their thing and, appreciate that you have someone in your gourd. But sometimes you can discourage them from nesting in there. If you see them starting to bring in nesting material, you can just kind of sweep some of it out. Maybe they'll get annoyed and move on. Or another option is to offer them a different house. So if they're showing interest in your gourds, put up a bluebird house or a chickadee house, or, a couple of them, and they might find that that's what they're more interested in anyways. And so there are ways around it, but they are protected, so you don't want to mess with them too much. So this is a decoy I was mentioning before. It just slides right onto one of those little wire racks. It's a great target for predators, and it also helps to attract your birds. There's a daytime audio attraction like CD, which is I have not figured out a good way to play a dawn song that's on a CD player that needs batteries that someone needs to turn on without spending a few $1,000s. I've not figured out a good way to play an audio lure system at our gourd racks at Beidler. At Beidler, it's at the end of our driveway in this nice big field. We don't have power out there. We don't have solar panels. I was having an intern go out there with a CD player like at 5 a.m. and turn it on, bless her heart. And it didn't end up working and the CD player died. But anyways, that is, if you have power near your house and you can like set it on a timer, that's a great way to do it. There's also something called the Songbird Magnet. It's a little box. and you can set it to either the Purple Martin Dawn song, and then there's a few other options, but honestly, it's a little junky, a little cheap, but it does work well because it has a light sensor on it. And as soon as it gets light out, it'll start playing the Purple Martin Dawn song, which helps to attract them. And actually, they're up flying and singing a lot earlier than many other birds. I was out in the woods last week at Bidler, and I was setting up nets. It was still dark. I had my headlamp on, and nothing else was awake, but I could hear Purple Martins flying over and singing. And it was like, and you can't go in my gourds out there. They're right there. So I knew they were there. But anyways, so in a season, Purple Martins tend to be monogamous. Sometimes the female will have extra pair mating, and so the males are usually very they do a lot of mate guarding. So he's like a clinger, you know, he just doesn't let her go around without him. So he's like, oh, I'm just going out for some bugs. And like, wait, I'll come with you. Because he doesn't want his female meeting up with another male. And sometimes second year males can be a problem. They'll be really aggressive. Sometimes they'll kill chicks. We've seen that before. So yeah, the drama and the social hierarchy in these Purple Martin colonies is HBO worthy. Now, their nests themselves, they typically make them out of pine straw. So if you set up a new colony and there's no pine straw around, like, you know, pine tree forests with a leaflet or anything like that, you could actually put out a bale of fresh pine straw and they'll come down and take pine straw from it. And they can also seed a little bit of pine straw in your gourds if you want to, not necessary. But they also like to line it with like a fresh bed of green leaves, which is really neat. It's a very fancy looking little nest, but they'll, you know, go picking leaves around and line their nest with it. And they typically have 3 to 6 eggs. This one, in this case, it's 6 eggs. And these little guys are probably a few hours old. They're itty bitty. And they usually only have 1 to 2 broods and only a second brood if something happens with their first one. So either there's a bad weather event or it's predated or something happens and their first nesting fails, then they'll usually do a second one, but not always. And it depends on what time and what point in the nesting process that it happens. If the chicks are almost grown, something happens, something eats them, they're probably not going to try again until the next year. So it really just kind of depends. The incubation period is 15 to 18 days. And then the nesting period is 27 to 36 days. So you're talking like 2 months, you know, give or take. And then post-fledge care, 7 to 14 days. So that means the fledglings are flying around. They're sticking really close to the gourd. Sometimes they'll roost in there and they'll come back at night, but not always. So I'm going to talk to you about colony management the Mary Pringle way. It's she runs a tight ship. But what you want to do if you're going to collect data and monitor your gourds, which I think is what you guys are going to set up for your volunteer program, which is fantastic. You do a nest check every week. And the number you want to actually, you can see, it's hard to see here, but you number each gourd so you can keep track and you don't confuse which one you just counted. So it's like a little address, a little birdie address. And that will help you keep your data straight. And you want to aim for your nest checks midday or afternoon. You want to avoid first thing in the morning or in the evening. That's when parents are trying to get their first meal or their last meal into the chicks before bedtime. So and try and aim for midday after they've already had breakfast and the parents are out foraging for themselves. Try not to go more than 10 to 14 days without checking on your colony. So if you go on vacation or go out of town, if you have someone else to check on them, that would be good. Just, you know, keep track of what's going on. And then be careful after day 22, because I mentioned, you know, some of the birds will fledge early if you're not careful, you don't plug up the holes as you're putting the nest or the gourd rack back up. So after day 22, plug that hole up and just try not to let them jump out. So another thing to pay attention to, you know, you're going to get very familiar with the sound of your birds and you will be able to tell if they're irritated or if they're agitated, if there's a predator around or if there's a snake or something else is going on, you'll be able to hear it and they'll tell you. You'll also want to check after bad weather. So if you've had a storm the night before or a lot of wind, sometimes the chicks will fall out. And if that does happen, luckily birds can't really count well. So as long as you put the chick back up in one of the gourds with a similar aged clutch, it should be fine. So if you're not positive which one it came from, make a best guess and just throw them in there. That's fine. So mom can't count. This is what the Nest Watch data sheet looks like for martins. So you have the house number or the address for your little birdies. The male and female age, is it a young pair? Are they both, full-fledged adults? You want the date your first egg is laid, your hatch date that you're projecting, the actual hatch date, and the earliest possible fledge date. And then you got egg number, hatch number, and fledge number. Those can all be different. You just never know what's going to happen with all of that. And then another Mary Pringle way is to, right when the chicks are around 9 or 10 days old, so they're just getting big enough to band, but they're pretty far away from that like danger zone of 22 days. Take the gourds down one by one and actually remove the chicks. And that's usually when I come in and band them. And I'll, weigh them, measure them, they each get a band, and they're super cute, kind of. And then you can actually clean out the nesting material and bleach the inside real quick, put fresh pine straw in, put the babies back in, put it back out there. And that really helps with parasites. So I've seen colonies like abandoned before because the parasites got so bad. One time I went up to band some chicks and the entire outside of the gourd was just like crawling with mites. And as soon as I touched it and them, I had mites going up my arms and it was gross. Did not love that. But changing the nesting material halfway through really helps to cut down on those parasites. They usually breed and like stay down in those in the pine straw and stuff like that. So good nest management will make a big difference. But you can see we have a whole little system here. We usually get a team of people. One person is the runner. They bring the box with the chicks. Someone else is cleaning the gourd. And then this one is a box that's about to get banded. We've got our data sheet here. We're doing weights and band numbers. And then we reload it with pine straw. And then they get ferried right back out, put right back up. And the whole process takes less than an hour. And it's usually midday. Parents are still flying around foraging for bugs. They know the drill and they're okay with it. So if you guys get to that point, I will happily come out and we'll all do it together and I can help run that show. Now, a lot of folks, I'm not sure if you guys got one of these. I feel like you maybe did the prognosticator. Okay, that is a fun little tool. It's kind of like a little spin dial thing that you'd see in elementary school, but it helps you understand like when your first egg is laid. Let's see. Yeah, you like, this is the date here. Your first egg is laid, and then it helps you find out when they're going to hatch and when they're going to fledge. It helps you predict that timeline. And then we also have these different sheets here where it's like actually to scale. So I can just plop the little baby down on the picture and be like, oh, this one is 7 days old, this is a real one. So he's just sitting on that little 7-day-old picture. Compared to the 6th day, you can see the feathers aren't quite out yet, but they are on this one. So that's how old he was. So they grow very, very quickly. And then banding, each chick is given a band, they're weighed, and they get a little pat on the head and a clean nest and sent on their way. This is a little yogurt cup with a paper towel in it. And you just kind of set them in there like a little nest and weigh them and off they go. And one time it was pretty cool. I got this chick out and the parent had just delivered a huge dragonfly for them to eat before I was banding them. And to like, look at the size of the baby and the food. It's like, how do you handle that? But they must. And then for some reason I have a blank slide in here. Sorry about that. And then this is one of the older birds. He was a little tough to handle. He was pretty much ready to fly, but he needed a few more days to hang out at home. So I handled him a little bit differently, but look at that mouth. It just says, feed me. So when you're starting a colony, you never want birds to die. You want all your eggs to hatch and everything to go great. But success rates can vary very regularly from 50 to 80%. And that's between chicks fledged out of eggs laid. So, say you start out the season with 25 eggs and 12 chicks end up fledging, that's not bad. You know, it happens. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, but you know, just don't expect 100% because you're probably not going to get it. The minimum fledge age is 26 days old. So don't expect them to leave any sooner than that. And you, again, drive the point home that you want quality of care over the quality of care over the quantity of birds. So don't start out with 48 gourds. That's a lot. You know, start with 6 or 12. And as your colony grows, you can add gourds every year. You can add onto your pole system. Just don't go bananas at first and get overwhelmed. There are things you can do. If you are a Purple Martin landlord, you can join the Purple Martin Conservation Association. They have a lot of good information. They're the Purple Martin experts. They also have a scout arrival study. So if you are out birding, like it sounds like a lot of you are pretty regularly, you can, report when you're seeing your very first Purple Martins when the scouts are arriving, so we can kind of watch the wave of birds arrive. Banding, that's I have the permits for it, but you know me, so we can do that too. And then the Purple Martin Watch is essentially monitoring your gourds, recording the data, and then submitting it to the Purple Martin Conservation Association. So just keeping an eye on everything. And there's a few other things to do. I'm pretty sure I'm preaching to the choir on this, and you guys know all this information, but I'm just going to run through it real quick anyways. If you don't have the space for a Purple Martin colony, or even if you do, native plants are the best thing to help these birds, aside from providing them housing. Native plants support insects, and 96% of land birds eat insects and feed the insects to their chicks, including Purple Martins. And so to give you an idea of how many insects they need, a nestling chickadee nest here will eat 390 to 570 caterpillars a day. Or in 2 weeks, a nest of chickadees will eat over 9,000 caterpillars before they fledge. So insects are very important. And specialization is key. 90% of the insects that eat plants can only eat the native plants which they co-evolved. So I know we all love our azaleas and our knockout roses and crepe myrtles, but they don't do anything for birds. I'm really sorry. They're trash. Planting native really helps out a lot more. So to show you in comparison, this is a native oak species, probably a white oak. It supports 537 species of caterpillars compared to, does anyone know what this is? A ginkgo tree. Lovely tree, very ancient tree. Medicinal uses, but only 4 species of caterpillars. So when you're planting non-native plants, you are essentially just taking away habitat. Even though if it's green, it's full, it's pretty, birds sit in it. It is really, it's kind of like a barren landscape in a way, food source wise. So if you are ready to be a Purple Martin landlord, or participate, let me know what questions you have. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
You mentioned how big an opening.
Oh, yes. I don't have that stat off the top of my head. All the gourds, I want to say it's 1 3/8 inches or 1.5 inches. I can't remember. I will get back to you on that one. Yes.
The person that will determine themselves, do they go back to when?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some are and some aren't. So typically we will band a lot of chicks, like at Mary Pringle's colony. We've been banding her chicks for years, and very, very rarely is a banded adult ever seen at the colony. So many times all the chicks will disperse, and that has to do with genetics. You know, you don't want to go back to your home range and end up accidentally mating with a sibling. You know? It's weird. Right. They probably come back to the same general landscape, but not into their same territory genetics wise. Prothonotary warblers, I banned a lot of those up in Weidler Forest, and we banned a lot of nestling chicks, and we almost never ever see a banded bird come back that was banded as a chick. So they disperse into other areas of the swamp, which is really interesting. But the same bird breeding in one spot will come back to the same exact spot every year. So once they find their breeding territory, they will keep coming back to that gourd until it's not there anymore. Yes.
question, piggyback on that, so
Yeah.
you ban almost all your good.
Yeah.
Ban a lot.
Yeah.
What program that getting that information, that help in getting that banded information out of the bill?
So the band recovery usually happens if, say, I banded a chick and then it ran into a building. We'll get that information back. Or that chick ended up at another colony, someone reported it, and then a lot of times photographers, they can take really good pictures and photograph them, and eventually you can piece together the band number, which is pretty hard because it's not a very big band, but with a good camera you can do that. And so a lot of times we'll learn that way and get a band return, or it shows up to either a wintering site where they're banding birds and they're able to recapture it. So you're putting a lot of bands out there with hopes that you get maybe one or two back. So but you do learn a lot of other stuff in the process, between productivity, survivorship, sizes, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
With the monitoring of the new house, the John Valley.
Yes.
We've got really great checking.
Yeah.
How it's too late to be expecting them to arrive. Everything we're happy going out.
Yeah.
By the end of July.
I say into June. Yeah, because you can get it up by June 1st and you may still get some birds coming in, but probably not much later than that. So yeah. Yeah. Okay, so 2 1/8. All right, that's the whole diameter size. Thank you. Yeah. So I bought a couple gourds with the starling resistant openings, and it's almost like a crescent shape. And honestly, I've not found starlings to be an issue here. And I have also found that the martins tend not to like those. So I think in an area where starlings are a problem, those are probably necessary and the martins will just deal with it. But we have actually had to modify some of our gourd sizes because I just thought, oh yeah, starling resistant, we should get that too. But it hasn't been an issue, and then I don't think they like it as much. So what was it, 2 1/8? That sounds like the winner. Yeah.
Stories are we going to have to do?
We've got 6 gourds. Yep. Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. So when you're talking about average versus potential, average lifespan is less than a year. Most birds don't make it past a year, but the ones that do have a much better odds. So if they've shown themselves or proven themselves through migration and back, they've got a much better survival rate. For a purple martin, I would guess 8 years is a good lifespan for a purple martin. I know they've got to have the longevity record recorded somewhere, but I don't know that off the top of my head. But I would guess that would be an average for an adult. Yeah. Oh, probably that must be how it spaces out well in the manufacturing process. I don't think that's a hardened rule. I've seen people actually make gourd racks out of old satellite dishes, and then so they've got 12 all hanging around there. So you can get creative, but I think it's just easier to sell in half a dozen or a dozen.
I noticed in one of the pictures that there was one of the things you brought on us. I know we've read that about this before. I think as we speak on it, here we good to know. We're about age for it.
Ooh, yeah, bird flu. So that is that has become an issue. I think if bird flu hits your colony, you're gonna know before you're expose yourself, most likely. If your birds all start dropping dead, I probably wouldn't touch them. Yeah.
There's that we have not seen bird flu, some birds and birds that are sick.
Yes.
Say,
Yeah. Yeah, anyone, so the Purple Martin Conservation Association would probably be the first to know and record it and then send out guidance. So until then, I wouldn't worry about it. I handle songbirds all the time and I just wash my hands. But if you're working with shorebirds, they are more likely to get it. Raptors and corvids are slightly more, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so birds that are hanging out together in tight flocks, waterfowl, shorebirds, they tend to get it through them, and that's not good. Canada geese was another issue, and then the vultures that go down and eat them. We actually lost a number of bald eagle chicks in the past couple of years to avian flu. So it's around, but luckily for this group of birds, it tends not to be an issue so far. So great question. All right. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.